5. Notice that the trinomial has a leading coefficient that is not 1. There are a few ways to factor this kind of trinomial. The method we're going to use is called trial and error. To factor the trinomial, first write two sets of parentheses for the binomials. What we're going to do is try different combinations of factors of the terms and use the FOIL method to see which is correct. Since the only whole number factors of 2 are 2 and 1, we know that the first terms of the binomials are 2x and x, so let's put those in. The second numbers in each set of parentheses must have a product of 5. Again, we're lucky because 5 only has two factors, 5 and 1. Put the 5 in one set of parentheses and the 1 in the other. Since the constant term is positive and the coefficient of x is negative, we know that these terms are negative. Now let's multiply the binomials to see if we made the right choice. The product of the first terms is 2x squared. The product of the last terms is 5. Our only concern is the sum of the products of the outer terms and the inner terms. 2x times negative 5 is negative 10x. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. Negative 10x plus negative 1x is negative 11x. We need the middle term to be negative 7x, so these factors do not work. That's why it's called trial and error. We tried one combination of numbers, and it didn't work. The only other possible combination is to switch the 5 and the 1. Let's see if that gives us the right sum. The product of the outer terms is negative 2x, and the product of the inner terms is negative 5x. Negative 2x and negative 5x is negative 7x. Since this is the correct middle term, these are the correct factors. So the factors of 2x squared minus 7x plus 5 are 2x minus 5 and x minus 1. Note that the more ways the coefficient of the first term and the constant term can be factored, the more possible combinations there are to try. We're going to factor this polynomial using factoring by grouping. Here's the procedure for using the grouping method. First, multiply the coefficient of the first term, a, and the constant term, c. Then find two numbers whose product is the same as a times c, and whose sum is b, the coefficient of the middle term. Rewrite the middle term, bx, as a sum using these two numbers. Finally, factor by grouping. Let's try it. First, multiply 2 and 5, which equals 10. We want the sum to be negative 7. Now think of two numbers that have a product of 10, and at the same time have a sum of negative 7. Let's try 5 and 2. 5 times 2 is 10, but 5 plus 2 is positive 7, not negative 7. However, this tells us we're close. To get a positive product and a negative sum, make both numbers negative. Negative 2 times negative 5 is 10, and negative 2 plus negative 5 is negative 7. Now write the middle term, minus 7x, as minus 2x and minus 5x. Don't forget the other terms, 2x squared and plus 5. Now there are four terms. Notice that the first two terms have the common factors 2 and x, and the last two terms have the common factor 5. Group the first two terms together, and the last two terms together. Factor each group. Factor the common factor 2x out of the first group to get 2x times x minus 1. So the factors in parentheses are identical. Factor the common factor negative 5 out of the second group to get minus 5 times x minus 1. Now factor out the common factor x minus 1. The other factor is the terms outside the parentheses, 2x minus 5. The factored form of the polynomial is x minus 1 times 2x minus 5. Let's factor this trinomial by grouping. We have 9x squared minus 64x plus 7. There's no common factor other than 1, so to start, multiply the first coefficient and the constant term. 9 times 7 equals 63. We need to find two numbers that have a product of positive 63 and a sum of negative 64, the coefficient of the middle term. 63 times 1 is 63. And if we add these together, we get 64. To get negative 64, make both numbers negative. So our two numbers are negative 63 and negative 1. Bring down the 9x squared. Rewrite negative 64 as negative 1x, or just negative x, minus 63x, and bring down the last term, plus 7. The first two terms have the common factor x. Factor this group to get x times 9x minus 1. In the second group of terms, to make the factors in the parentheses identical, factor out negative 7. Negative 63 divided by negative 7 is positive 9. The factored form of the second group is negative 7 times 9x minus 1. Now factor out the common factor 9x minus 1 to get 9x minus 1 times x minus 7. The polynomial is now completely factored.